Hello and welcome back to the Tank Club. Today I wanted to show you the best gear traits to use for tanking. So the reason for doing this is because a lot of people ask about gear traits quite often. So I thought it'd be a good idea to tell you about all the various setups that I like to use, when and why I use them, and also compare the differences between various traits of gear. So for this video we won't be talking about jewelry or weapons. We are looking just at the body and the shield pieces, as they kind of share the same traits and have the same impact. Quite a big impact on your character. So some base information. I'm using a Nord DK with 64 points into health and the Atronach Munderstone. I have no skill points slotted, so these are all kind of base stats that we're going to be looking at. So the most useful traits for tanks are Sturdy, Infused, Divines, Well Fitted, and Reinforced. So when you farm in gear, if you're a newer tank, if you pick up something that's in any of those traits, it's worth keeping and using while you work on fully optimizing your build to where you want to be at. Now, I am personally very particular with how I set up for each piece of content, so I have multiple sets of the same gear, sometimes with different traits, so that I can optimize every single situation, and that's just my personal preference. Now, you don't have to do this yourself, but when you farm gear, it's worth thinking about saving additional traits of the same gear, especially really vital tank sets. So for example, the Claw of Yolnahkrin set, you might collect a full Sturdy set because obviously that is going to be your main set, but you might also save Well Fitted or Divines pieces as well, so that you can be more versatile in different situations where you might not be blocking as much, for example. So if we take a look at some kind of base max stats that I've got: 12k Magicka, 23,808 health, 12,000 stamina, we've got 824 Magicka recovery. If we look on our advanced stats, 1,750 block cost, 4,040 dodge roll cost. So these are the main things we're going to be looking at throughout this video. So the first trait that we're going to look at this time is Sturdy. If you take a look at what we've got on the screen here, so we've got a gold piece of Sturdy gear, and that reduces the cost of block by 4%. So each piece of gold Sturdy gear will reduce the cost of block by 4%. So every single time you get hit while blocking, it's going to reduce how much blocking each hit will cost. So Sturdy is at its most effective when you either block a lot or you are against multiple enemies. So Sturdy is my number one choice for tanking. It's always been a good choice, but it's even more important now since the Flames of Ambition patch. Using all 8 pieces of Sturdy gear is my preferred setup for basically everything. We had some changes to block cost with this patch because of the champion points and the armor penalties and bonuses, so a full Sturdy setup is generally the most superior setup to use. So if we take a little look, the main stat we're going to be looking at here is our block cost, and that has gone from 1,750 to 1,190. Now let's say you're using purple gear, that would be 1,260. So it does have quite an impact by upgrading your gear from purple to gold. I know some people are often a bit on the fence as to whether they should upgrade it or not, but from that perspective, not only will you gain more resistances by golding it out, but you're also going to gain quite a lot more block cost reduction as well. So this is going to be reduced even further. So this 1,190 is just a base stat. It's going to be reduced further if we use the one-handed shield passive. If we had Fortress slotted, we'd have another 18% block cost reduction. If you are an Imperial, you get another 6% reduced cost of block. It reduces all your abilities by 6%, but that includes block cost and roll dodge and everything like that as well. So that is worth thinking about when choosing the race of your character. You can also use bracing jewelry enchants, but I would never use more than one of those, and I personally don't use any. They have a really bad diminishing return, so the more you use, the less effective they are. If you want to lower your block cost, then full Sturdy gear is your biggest priority and the best way to do so, as it has the biggest impact. The block cost CP is basically a waste of champion points, and it has almost no effect on your block cost, which is why full Sturdy is even more important. Now, if we have a look at all the other stats while we're here, just to kind of get some other base stats, we're going to add in resistances here. Our resistance is 16,617. We've got our max stamina and magicka at 14,436 and our max health at 26,488. And our roll dodge now we've got all heavy on has gone up to 4888. Full sturdy, as I said, is my absolute #1 choice because block cost and your stamina sustain by reducing the cost of block is more valuable than anything else. With the Flames of Ambition patch, we gained higher max stats as a base amount, so that meant that sturdy became more effective because we already have a lot of stats. Adding a little bit more into the stats had less of an impact, but the changes to the champion points and all those other things had a negative impact on our block cost, so adding the extra sturdy pieces has a much bigger impact now. Okay, next we're going to switch some gear over. So we're going to switch these to infused pieces. This is an older kind of setup, a common older setup of using infused pieces on the big slots. So the big slots are obviously your legs, your chest, your head, and your shield. So going full infused is not something I would ever do, and I don't suggest it as a particularly good option either, because you'll have higher stats, but they won't be super high stats. You're not going to gain a hell of a lot of more stats. However, you are going to sacrifice pretty much all of your sustain while blocking for a small increase to your max stats. So infused increases the armor enchantment effect by 25% at gold quality. So as you can see there, our enchant has gone up to 542 max magicka and stamina and 596 max health. If we compare that to a normal enchant, obviously it's 434 and 477. So it's jumped up a little bit. So if we look at our stats now, we've gained some magicka, health and stamina. The main thing we want to look at is our advanced stats. We want to look at that block cost. So with 4 infused, the first big thing is our block cost has jumped from 1,190 to 1,470. So every hit we block is going to be 280 stamina more expensive. And that is a big kind of negative impact on sustain. So the question is, do we gain enough benefits to justify it? Our max magicka and stamina have gone from 14,436 to 14,868, which is an increase of 432. And our health has gone from 26,488 to 26,964, which is an increase of 476. So in my opinion, it's not worth losing all the extra block sustain for such a small amount of resource gain. So let's say we don't use the infused shield. Let's switch the infused shield back to sturdy. We just go with the 3 body pieces infused instead. And that puts us on 1,400 block cost, which is still 210 more every hit than full sturdy. So think about it this way. If we go into combat and we tank 3 enemies and they hit us once every 4 seconds, we're going to lose basically 4,200 stamina every 4 seconds blocking those 3 enemies. Now, if we had those 3 pieces as sturdy instead, it would only cost us 3,570, which is a 630 stamina difference just blocking 1 hit from the 3 enemies. Now, if we kind of take 20 seconds to kill those enemies, that would be a cost of 21,000 stamina if we have 3 infused pieces and the rest in sturdy. If we were full sturdy, it would only cost us 17,850 to block those enemies for the same duration, which is a 3,150 stamina cost difference. So by using the full sturdy, it would be over a 3k stamina less to block for 20 seconds 3 enemies that hit us every 4 seconds. By not going full sturdy, you are making a huge impact on your ability to sustain blocking. I personally don't like infused shields, since you lose all of your stats from your shield enchant when you bar swap. So when you go onto your back bar, when you're using an ice staff, when you swap, you're going to lose the effects of the enchant. So it just doesn't seem logical to infuse that stat, making the loss of stats even bigger every single time you go onto your back bar. So you want to mitigate the loss of stats as much as possible, so we'll just use a different trait on the shield. I don't think using infused is worth it, because you just don't want to have a huge loss of health and resources when you switch to your back bar. And if you are switching front and back quite regularly, they're going to keep dropping down and coming back again, and it doesn't seem to make much sense to me to really do that. Okay, so next we're going to look at well fitted. Now, this is something you don't need to use very often. You might not use it very often. You might not ever use it at all. There are certain situations for me when this trait is an option that I like personally. So typically I would never use a full well-fitted setup. When I use it, generally it would just be on the small slots only. So the shoulder, the waist, the hands and the feet. I have used a full well-fitted setup, and that was on veteran Kind's Aegis hard mode with the Falgraven boss, and that's because it can be quite intense in the execute phase. Sustaining dodge roll can be quite tricky, so I did use a full well-fitted setup for that one situation. I also have used a full well-fitted setup in Cloud Rest when tanking the Griffins. However, I would just use medium armor for that, since there are basically no point using heavy armor when you are roll dodging every single attack, so you might as well benefit from the medium armor passives in that situation. It's not really worth using a heavy armor set or well-fitted for tanking the Cloud Rest Griffins. Other places I would use some well-fitted are like Asylum Sanctorium as the off-tank in the VAS +1 and 2, because you are reducing the roll dodge and sprint, and it's really nice. And you could also use some well-fitted on the main tank in the same trial as well, if you plan on kind of dodge rolling St. Olms's light attacks and take basically no damage. So there are some situations where this is really useful to go with a few well-fitted pieces in those kind of situations that I mentioned. So if we do look at the full well-fitted, obviously we've got all full well-fitted there. So if we take a look at full well-fitted, you could go with this kind of setup on a very hard-hitting boss fight and just roll dodge all of its main hits. So like the dodge roll decrease has gone from 4,888 to 2,545, which is a huge decrease. Now if you plan to roll dodge a lot, then obviously this is something you can consider doing. And as you can see, the block cost is up at 1,750, so it's very expensive to actually block attacks now. You could always combine infused big pieces with well-fitted small pieces to get a few different benefits. Even just putting 1 or 2 well-fitted pieces into your build when you are going into situations where you need to roll dodge can really benefit you sustain. So overall, well-fitted isn't the #1 choice for me, but it's something that you need to think about depending on the content that you are doing. You can always use the Expert Evasion Champion Point slottable if you are roll dodging infrequently, but if you are roll dodging more often, then consider using a few pieces of well-fitted, generally on the body pieces so they are always active when you need them. And like I say, if you are roll dodging quite frequently, maybe use a few pieces on the body. If you're roll dodging a lot, then consider using even more pieces. So next we've got the Divines trait, and at gold quality this trait affects the Munda Stone that you've got, increasing it by 9.1% per piece of Divines that you're using. So there are only really 2 Munda Stones that are worth using for tanking nowadays, and that is the Atronach or the Steed. Some people like to use the Lady or the Lord and things like that. Typically they're not really worth using anymore. Resistances aren't as impactful at this point in time, and max health is very easy to achieve by using your champion points and that kind of thing. So for this we're just looking at small pieces of Divines. As you can see here, we're using the Atronach Munda Stone, and we have gained now 965 Magicka recovery. That has gone up 141 more Magicka recovery compared to before, where it was 824. So it kind of looks like it's barely worth using. However, there are kind of many other sources of Magicka recovery that you would gain, which would pile on top of this. So typically things like Magicka recovery jewelry, maybe some skill passives and things in there as well. There's definitely when you have like your barrier slotted in your Magicka raid passive and things like that. So it will have a bigger impact later down the line when you've got other things stacked on top of it. Now by using Divines, I typically pair this with infused big pieces if I am using it, which does mean that I'm using 0 sturdy. We do have a block cost of 1,750. However, this is a setup I would only use in situations where I don't plan on really blocking. My priority is sustain and casting skills more frequently. The main 2 places where I use this setup are in Asylum Sanctorium as the main tank. I don't block anything other than the light attacks, and these hit once every 5 seconds, but sometimes the boss will do the Heavens mechanic and then the Lightning AoE, then the Breath mechanic, so you can end up spending 30 seconds not blocking. So I want to benefit more, and I want to be able to maintain a lot of buffs and debuffs, so I max out my sustain and my stats more so than anything else, because I'm barely blocking, so I don't need to buff up my sturdy and my block cost reduction in a situation where I'm not really blocking. I also use this setup for Cloud Rest, but I sometimes use the Steed Mundus when we're doing that. So the reason, again, is that you don't really need to block very often. And even if you do need to block for a few seconds, there is so much available time to do heavy attacks that stamina sustain is never really an issue. However, using Divines and the Atronach Mundus drastically improves your portal sustain, and then for the execute tank, Divines and the Steed Mundus really helps having the additional movement speed to get across the room and get away from the darkness AoE to spend more time in the kind of group heals. And you also gain the additional health recovery, and health recovery doesn't get affected by the Baneful Mark. So in those situations, it becomes quite useful. Okay, so finally we're kind of looking at Reinforced and a little bit of Nirnhound as well. Now, at white quality, Nirnhound is actually better than Reinforced, but when you upgrade the traits, it becomes useless to use Nirnhound, and Reinforced is much better, as the armor value from Reinforced is more upgraded because it's percentage based and Nirnhound is a set value. So you get more benefit from using Reinforced than you do Nirnhound. I've spoken about resistances in a previous video, which I advise you look at if you are kind of concerned about your resistances. Now, the difference between 33k and 25k resistances is not really a huge amount. If you get hit by a 100k hit with 75% block mitigation, the damage difference between 33k and 25k would be about 3k more damage. So my suggested resistances are anywhere from like 28 to 30k, which is achievable with basically no effort. And it will provide you with enough defense to kind of clear all content in the game. Now, if you're using medium armor as an off-tank, then you might use 1 or 2 reinforced pieces, and that can help a little bit. If you are truly adamant on boosting your resistances, you can do so with a few gear pieces in reinforced. So the chest piece is the main piece that it can be worth using as reinforced if you really want one. It has way more armor than every single other piece of gear when you upgrade it to reinforced. So the other pieces are much lower armor value when they are reinforced. The chest has a huge value higher, so it's the main one that is worth like using as reinforced. So a normal chest piece will have 2,772 armor. A reinforced chest piece has 3,215 armor. If you wanted to use 2 reinforced pieces, then I personally would go with the chest and the shield. I don't think reinforced is worth using personally, but if you must use it, then go kind of full sturdy with everything else, and then the chest in reinforced if you have to use the second one, the shield, but I wouldn't use more than the 2 reinforced pieces. And just kind of to show you the comparison between reinforced and Nirnhound, as you can see there, the reinforced shield is 1995 armor, and the Nirnhound shield is 1973. So the reinforced is better than the Nirnhound. At white quality, the Nirnhound actually is better than the reinforced one, but later on down the line, as they're upgraded more, there is a bigger difference between the two. So if we look at the stats of sturdy with 2 reinforced pieces, we've sacrificed some block sustain, but we've gained more resistances. So we've got 17,335 resistances compared to the 16,557 we had before. It's an increase of 778 resistances, but our block cost is 140 more stamina per hit. So that will have quite a big impact depending on the length of the fight and how many enemies you're trying to tank. If we only use reinforced on the chest and we go ahead with a sturdy shield, then our block is 1260 and our resistance is 17060. So there are many ways to already kind of buff your resistances. So use the resistance CP, use your heavy armor passives, and buff yourself with major resolve. You'll also often gain minor resolve from a healer hitting you with combat prayer, which means you're basically going to be at the resistance cap with all of those sources of resistances already. And the reinforced pieces are generally not worth the big sustained sacrifice. So other traits we didn't really talk about, we've got training, which boosts the amount of experience that you gain. So obviously you should use that when leveling to gain more XP, but it holds no real value for actual tanking. We've got impenetrable. This reduces your crit damage received. In PvE content, you can't be crit damaged by enemies, so it's useless, and it's just a useless trait in PvE. In PvP, when you're against other players, they can crit damage against you, so then it's obviously worth it for PvP. But in a PvE situation, it's just not worth using. You got invigorating, which increases your recoveries by 8. So you get 8 magicka recovery, 8 health recovery, 8 stamina recovery. It's the most useless trait in the game, and I would say it kind of needs reworking. You would get far better sustain by using Divines with magicka recovery, Mundus Stone. You basically lose all of your stats and sustain benefits for a tiny amount of recovery. So it is just completely useless. And then Nerdhound we did mention a little bit. It's worse than Reinforced. The more you upgrade it, the less value it is compared to Reinforced. It's just not really worth using. So just to kind of recap there, the main priority for tank gear is to go full sturdy. It has such a huge impact on your ability to block and sustain your blocking and sustain your stamina. There are a few different things that you can do. So if you dodge roll a lot, incorporate some well fitted. If you're not blocking very much at all in certain fights where bosses hit very infrequently and can have 20-30 second gaps in between hits, then using things like Divines, Infused, well fitted, incorporated in there can be very useful. But overall, for pretty much 95% of content, you want to be going full sturdy because it just has such a big impact on your ability to sustain as a tank. So I hope this video has helped you understand the value of the various gear traits, and there'll be more videos soon about other things like jewelry and gear weights, enchants and things like that. They are coming very soon. If you've got any questions, let us know in the comments below or on the Tank Club Discord. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.